Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Commander Clash podcast, where the Commander Clash crew talks all things Commander, and we have an interesting one this week. This week, we're talking about cards that we think shouldn't actually exist. Commander cards that shouldn't exist. So that's the topic for today. Should say, this doesn't necessarily mean we think the card should be banned. Some of the cards we might also think they should be banned. Some of them might just be cards that we wish they had never made to begin with, but it'd be kind of silly to ban them. So that's going to be what we're getting into today. Before we get into that, we got to introduce the crew. First off, we have Budget Commander / Tomer. How's it going today, Tomer?
I'm doing all right. I like complaining, as any good Commander player does.
We're Magic players. There's nothing we like more than complaining and slinging
cardboard.
Complaining
more than playing. Yeah.
that actually might be true. And we have another co-host in Krim. Krim, how's the new place? Your wall looks slightly different than last episode, I think.
I am almost moved in. Okay, I still got to build a lot of shelves and stuff like that, but for the most part, I'm pretty excited because this was a tough task for me to do. Because I actually have a high tolerance for a lot of things.
So this is the worst Krim topic, yeah. Because Krim's just like, every card's fine, I don't care. Yeah. I'm just going to counter it anyway.
Maybe. Or not, and lose.
And I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, filling in for Richard this week. Richard still off in China at the moment, so it's like, I don't know, 1 a.m. and where he is or something ridiculous. So he won't be here this week. He'll be back in a couple of weeks. Before we get into the cast, a reminder that today's show is brought to you by Ultimate Guard, premium protection for your trading cards. All the gaming accessories that we use on the channel are supplied by Ultimate Guard, so you can flick your cards silky smooth like me by checking out ultimatecard.com. The ad reads a little weirder when I'm the one doing it. It works better when it's Richard reading it, I think. Today's show is also brought to you by Card Conduit, the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. Card Conduit lets you skip the typing and time and work associated with buy listing. You can use their curated service where you send in as many cards as you want with a buy list value of $1 or more and pay just a 5% service fee. And you can also use their sorted service where you list and sort your cards and pay just a 2% fee. And either way, you're going to get a detailed report with the results and a fast payment once your order is processed. And you can even get another 10% off by heading to cardconduit.com/mtggoldfish. MTG Goldfish. Card Conduit. It's the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. And now it's time for the Ultimate Guard comment of the week. So last podcast, we did... What did we do last? Oh, Fish Tank. It was another Fish Tank episode. And our top comment comes from StormyCat0905. And it said, Richard presenting PowerPoint slides in front of a shower curtain in a tank top makes him look like he's auditioning for a sequel to Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Richard did have the unique setup. He was somewhere in China at like 1 a.m. with behind a shower curtain in a tank top. The things you will find on the Commander Clash podcast.
I honestly have to applaud Richard. He had the whole setup done, right? Like he's like, let me explain to you PowerPoints and everything. I brought some percentages, and I'm like, okay,
he put work into that. Yeah, he really did.
It. Although, like on the Surveyor Scope, I definitely I'm a big fan of Surveyor Scope, so I definitely agree with him. But I also agreed with Krim. I want Krim to know that I don't think it's an auto include, but it's depends on the deck. But yeah, I don't want to go back on that.
Bedlam? We talking about Bedlam?
Bedlam, though.
Oh no, no one agrees about
Bedlam. 100% on board. It's not about winning. It's about speeding up the game. Hell yeah.
Thank you.
Anyway, that was the Ultimate Guard question of the week. Let's get into today's topic, which is Commander cards that we think shouldn't exist. So we had a pretty big list here. Some Commanders, some 99 cards. And let's kick it off with Tomer. Tomer, what's a Commander card that you believe just shouldn't exist?
Okay, there's a few, obviously. I have quite a list. But one that's been like really grinding my gears,
like 100 cards,
wrestling my jimmies in the latest games that I've participated in. Well, what Russell's jimmies? People say that.
It sounds like everything in Commander as in general Russell's your jimmies.
A little bit.
List is like 40 cards.
Some of them Russell more than others, and it's not like a good breeze. It's like a bad breeze. And the bad breeze for the first kicking it off is Trouble in Pairs. This is a new 4-mana white enchantment. It got printed at the beginning of this year. And it says, if an opponent would begin an extra turn, that player skips that turn instead. That line I have no problem with. It's the follow-up line that I do kind of have a problem with. It says, whenever an opponent attacks you with 2 or more creatures, draws their second card each turn, or casts their second spell each turn, you draw a card. Basically, what this card reads is like, if your opponents do anything, then you draw cards. And the amount of cards it draws for doing nothing is staggering. It's at least 3 cards per turn cycle the moment you put it down. There's 0 build around to it. There's 0 synergy that you need to build around it. You just pay 4 mana, and then suddenly every single turn you're drawing like 3 cards, 4 cards, and then it's like, oh, you should attack him. Well, attacking him also draws some cards. Oh, don't cast spells. Yeah, okay, I'm sure that's gonna win you games of Magic too. Oh, don't draw cards. What if like I have something that says like when you do something you draw a card, you know, like it's like, okay, just stop playing Magic and also don't attack the person because that will also draw me. It's not actually it's not actually play aroundable, and it's also not something that you build around. So it's like the best white card draw, one of the best card draw spells period that they printed in a very long time. And it's not like a make you work for it. Like, I like payoffs that are like either powerful effects, but you have to work for it, you know? You have to jump through a hoop to do it. You gotta build around it. This one is just like, oh, you built around it by paying 4 mana. Congratulations. Here is all the cards you need for the rest of the game. Ugh.
I play this card in like every deck, but that's just because I don't like losing to the extra turn player. Like the card draw, that's incidental. I don't really care about that. But yeah, this card, it's kind of the
yeah, sure.
There's what is it? Ugin's Nexus is waiting for you, or whatever the thing is.
It's kind of the White Wondering almost, with the amount of cards that it draws. Like, it's this 4-drop that just generates an absurd amount of card advantage. I was curious, Tomer, because I know you also really don't like Rhystic Study, because I think partly because it asks you to pay the 1, and that's like a constant thing, and it's super annoying. Is this better than Rhystic Study? Because at least it's not asking you anything. It's just like gonna happen when you do certain things. Or is it equally offensive to you as like Rhystic Study?
Is this not just another Rhystic Study?
It is Rhystic Study.
Because if you think about it, okay, you're going to ask Tomer every time he takes an action on his turn, how many cards did you draw? Oh, you drew 2 cards this turn? No. Okay, now I drew 2 cards. Okay. Oh, did you play a second spell? Okay, cool. Oh, how many creatures are attacking me? Though you are not being like, given an option to pay the 1, you are being constantly pestered on your turn. So is that not the same? Because it still triggers on somebody else's turn too. It's just like, oh, hold on, you just Sphinx's revved on Seth's turn. Okay, cool. So you drew more than 2 cards. Yes, I did. Okay.
It gets really wonky once opponents start drawing. Like, it's Tomer's turn, and then so that triggers something on Phil's board, so he draws cards, and next thing you know, like, you're just drawing cards for everyone. It's so absurd. But sorry, Tomer, go ahead. I interrupted your thought.
Well, I just think, like, I think Rhystic Study is even worse because it's on every single game, like every single spell that is cast.
Yeah.
So the triggers happens even more. And I think Rhystic Studies has a effect of slowing the game down more than Trouble in Pairs does. But Trouble in Pairs is more, in some ways, more egregious because I find it much more difficult to play around it. Like, if I want to be a responsible gamer, for Rhystic Study, I just say, cool, all my spells cost 1 more, and I just continue playing the game that way. This one, though, I don't think it is reasonable to play around it. You can't just say, like, okay, just stop drawing cards, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, don't cast more than 1 spell. Oh, and you want to punch that person? Well, you just can't attack them, you know? Like, it's like so
can't
much.
Hit them with more than 1.
That's
yeah,
like the
you can't hit them with more than 1.
That's the one part that you can kind of play around, is not attacking the person with Trouble in Pairs, but that's exactly the opposite of what you need to do to deal with the person with Trouble in Pairs. So it's like pushing you to do the exact wrong thing. This card, I was thinking about this. If it was the same card, but it only triggered on like the second spell being cast each turn, I think I would still play it. Like, I think it would still be very good. If it, like, one of the 3 things that trigger it, if it only triggered when an opponent casts their second spell, I think it would still draw enough cards that I would probably put it in decks. Like, that's how push this card actually is. That you could, like, lop the attack trigger off of it or whatever, lop the extra turn thing off of it, and it would still be a good card.
Well, like, there is Smuggler's Shaker, but I'm a believer
I
in
th-
Smuggler's Share, by the way, but it's on card draw. So drawing your second card, not casting your second spell, but I still think it's decent.
I think
So
this card's great. What?
Great as
I don't
in
like
is a
like.
powerful card because I agree, or is it
I mean, yes, we all know it's a powerful card, but I think it's great for the actual. This again, I have a high tolerance for a lot of things. I think this card is great just for the gameplay experience,
is it?
and I think it totally should exist because, example, some people just take a lot of actions in a turn, and it's nice to know that I can also keep up with you just because you keep drawing cards. Then you do a bunch of different things, and at the end of it all, like if I also get to like draw like maybe 3 to like 4 cards like every turn, I'm happy about it. I think it's good in a game of like multiplayer game. So that it's your way of keeping up with 3 other players and combating, like, I don't know, that the cards like this should exist because I like something that allows you to keep up in a multiplayer game. And this definitely keeps you up on resources. And I can't stress this enough. I just love seeing random extra turn hate.
I'm fine with that too. I just to be clear, I like powerful cards. I like drawing lots of cards. My main complaint with this is that there's no requirement for you to do that, right? You just kind of it exists, and that's what I don't like.
But that's how you keep up in Commander,
But,
right?
like,
Because it's like,
make me like gain life to draw cards. Make me make tokens to gain cards. Make me attack to gain cards. Make me do something to draw the cards, not just exist. I hate that part because it homogenizes everything, right? Like every if you're in a white deck, why would you not run this? You take out your synergy pieces to put it because your synergy pieces are worse than this. That's what I don't like about it. It's like, okay, now my white decks just have one less slot to actually like be creative with because the card's that good.
I mean, I fully agree that yeah, like it is an auto include in white, right? Like it's kind of become in the same way that everyone was upset with Arcane Signet when that came out, right?
Yeah.
Every deck will just play that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I think that a card like this, you do like. I get it. I get your point of view, and like, yeah, you do nothing except just pay 4 mana and just sit there.
Yeah.
But that unfortunately sounds like something, or maybe fortunately in my eyes, I think it's something that needs to exist.
I do wish it was kind of narrower. I do wish it was something that only worked in some decks because I found just like building decks recently. I put this in like every deck. Like it's one of those cards that like I like drawing cards and I want to like have a bunch of cards in hand. So why wouldn't I just play Trouble in Pairs? So I do kind of wish it had like more of a restriction. I like cards more that are really strong, but really strong in certain archetypes or certain decks than cards that are really strong in every deck. So I don't know if I'd go as far as to say I wish Trouble in Pairs didn't exist, but I do agree that this is those auto-include kind of cards are cards that I think are like end up being a negative for the format. And like if they keep happening too much, you end up in a world where every deck looks the same, right? Because everyone's playing the 50 auto includes and then like 10 unique cards, and that's what Commander ends up being. So if you go too far down that path, it ends up in a bad place for the game, I think. But let's keep moving on. Krim, what's a card that you think shouldn't exist?
Is it? God, it feels like beating a dead horse. Because everybody knows it, and it's Nadu. Right? Like, I just don't understand how Nadu exists. And for some odd reason, if you've been like in exile or in another dimension, Nadu's 1 green-blue, a 3/4 flying bird with creatures you control have whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put it into your hand. This ability triggers only twice each turn. So in a format where people do play a lot of Lightning Greaves, they can now, I guess, play Shuko just like they do in Modern. I just feel like this card we're not even going to go over the power level, right? Because it's obvious that the power level of this card is like insane. But I'm just talking about the actual play experience. If you were sitting there and when we saw, the Pro Tour top 8, when it was Nadu versus Nadu, where people just had to watch 2 Nadu players move Shuko around, try to figure out, oh, wait, did I target this one yet? Oh, I don't know. And commentators are like, oh, God, well, time to make a song. And I love the commentators for it because they could only do so much before you get lost in all the triggering. And then when Phil played it on Clash, it was so hard to follow. Like the actual just play pattern and the play experience of this card is miserable. It is absolutely like there's no easy way to track everything. Sure, before someone says you could bring out dice, great. But now I have to bring out dice, do this, and like that's a lot of dice. Do it for each little 1/1 critter. This card on power level also turns every 1/1 critter into an end game piece because you have to get rid of them all, kind of like when you play against Winota. So I don't know. I think there's just a miserable play experience here. Not even power level, even though I brought up a little bit of power level.
I mean, the power level is definitely it's just a mistake in like every way. Like power level mistake, game like play pattern mistake. I think you're very right that it feels a little bit like Paradox Engine, or in other formats maybe Eggs, where it leads to these really long non-deterministic combo turns. And in some ways it's even worse because every trigger you might be getting a land into play untapped, which is already ridiculous, but that's changing the information. And then you got to stop and think, okay, now I got this untapped mana. Should I be playing this thing from my hand before I move the equipment over and get another trigger? And it just leads to, I know something you've been talking about, Tomer, is time inequity, where you have this one player that's like taking up all the time at the format. I think that, or all the time at the table, I think that Nadu is like one of the worst commanders from recent years, and maybe from all time, it just like sucking up so much time from the table once it starts to go off.
Yeah, I mean, the only silver, like, obviously I agree with all these things. The only silver lining is that I think the commander community at large is aware of Nadu's reputation. So I went on EDH Rec and I looked at the top commanders from the past month, and Nadu's sitting at rank 45, which is still like
That's
relatively
pretty high.
But like, I don't know, there's like a bunch of random Assassin's Creed commanders that I forgot their names are above him. So that's a good sign. There's like a random Bat commanders above him. There's more Corvolds than Nadu somehow in the year 2024. So yeah,
some of that might be CDH too, because I know it's like one of the best CDH commanders right now. So that might actually be tipping the scales even higher in favor of it when in casual play. Maybe people are not actually playing it that much.
I mean,
there's also the daunting task of playing it too, right? Because how much, like, I've turned away decks just because I feel like I imagine that it is not going to be the easiest to play, because it's also just not going to be fun, but it's also not easy either.
Yeah.
Like just sitting there keeping track, it's like kind of trying to keep track of a Cathar's Crusade.
I will say also, like, for people listening, if you think that you can make a casual Nadu, just don't. Please do not. Do not. I'm sure you could in theory, but in practice, even a super power, even if you're doing equipment Nadu, you know, whatever the heck cool idea you have, it's not going to play as good as you envision it. It's still going to be horrible for your play group. Just don't. Just run anything else. You could do the motto thing with something else, like AC. Just run Tatyova or AC in the command zone and just do the thing you want to do anyway. And maybe put Nadu in the... No, don't put Nadu in the... Just leave it in CDH. You can play it in CDH. I'm sure it's fine there. But I mean, please don't in casual.
I don't think it's that bad in the 99. Is it that bad in the 99? If you're like a deck that's like not built around it and you're just playing it as like a way to protect your team, although maybe it's better if people just avoid it altogether. What about just banning it? Like, is this one that they should just actually... We're going through this in Modern now, right? Where their ban announcement was, I think when this goes up, was a couple of days ago. But I don't know at this point, but Nadu better be banned. If Nadu's not banned when this podcast is going live, I think WotC is, going to have riots in the parking lot.
Shugo's banned.
God, Wizards. But do you think they should just ban it? Is that... Because I know what they've said. From what I've heard from the RC is it's kind of like... We think people will just learn not to play it, basically, in casual. We think that the community will, just kind of not rule zeroed out, but just, self-regulate and not play this card because they'll learn that it's too good. Do you think that'll be enough to handle Nadu, and will that strategy work?
I think if you want to play it in CDH and people in the CDH community likes it, then keep it there, because I think they are correct that in casual it will just kind of disappear. We have a lot of annoying commanders out there, and people just kind of avoid it, especially when it stops being like the topical thing. But maybe it's good in CDH. Maybe people like it in CDH, and then let them play it if they want to play it.
Yeah. And even if they don't, it's CDH. So
I'm not
about winning. CDH. So it's about being competitive. So
I don't have a horse in this race. Like, if CDH players like it, I'm not playing CDH anyway. So just good.
Well, speaking of commanders that I think shouldn't exist, I wanna shout out my first card, which is a commander that I've played quite a few times, and that's Kenrith the Return King. So Kenrith the Return King, it was a buy a box promo back for original Eldraine. It's the like 5-mana white thing where you like pay a red and everything gets trample and haste. Pay 1 and a green, put a counter on the thing. Pay 2 and a white, someone gains 5 life. 3 and a blue, someone draws a card. 4 and a black, reanimate something. It's a very strong card. It does a ton of different things, and it is essentially just like the default good stuff 5-color commander. And that's the problem that I have with this card is I don't think that they should print, or very often at least, just good stuff 5-color commanders. I think that commanders like that are pretty bad for the format because it kind of encourages you to go back to that trouble in pairs thing. Since Kenrith doesn't point you in a direction, it kind of tells you just like play all the best cards, and playing all the best cards in 1 color or 2 colors is already very strong. And once you get to playing all the best cards in all 5 colors, you just end up with these like most busted cards in the format soup decks, which I don't think are really enjoyable to play with or to play against. So I love 5-color commanders. I think I play 5-color maybe more than anyone else in the Commander Clash crew, but I really want them to print. I want them to print more like 5-color commanders that push you in a direction. I'm not even against strong 5-color commanders. I think Goshen Tie of Life's Origins is a good example. It's a very, very strong commander, but it's very specific to playing a bunch of shrines in your deck, or Urtat, Remnarch of Memnarch. Really strong commander, but you got to be a mirror deck. Even like Cody or Ezio, cards like that I think are perfectly fine. So I think that I think that Kenrith.
I have an Ezio on my desk. It just so happens.
Ooh,
I just ordered it from Cardman.
Are you building around it? Is it going to be your commander?
It's in my Estrada.
I think it's Ezio.
Oh, it's going Estrada. But yeah, so I think that Kenrith it shouldn't exist, and those good stuff 5-color commanders should be avoided. I'd almost argue that Joda's like that too, Joda the Unifier. I know it kind of pushes you to play Legends, although I don't know if I consider Legends to be much of a theme anymore, because so many things are legendary that like you kind of accidentally have a lot of Legends in your deck. But Kenrith is the one that sticks out the most because it is the most popular of the generic 5-color commanders, and it is like the most generic of the 5-color commanders. So what do you guys think about just these generic good stuff commanders, especially in 5 colors?
I mean, they're like these shouldn't come out every other week. Because let's not lie here, it's a little annoying. I can't tell you how many times when I go to deck building, oh, I have a theme. I don't know what the commander is. Doesn't matter. I'll just use Kenrith.
Yep.
It was the same prior to Kenrith. It was Golos.
Yeah.
No idea what. Just play Golos.
Yeah.
At least Kenrith is locked, like, you know, in that it's not even locked because they're all 5-colored. That's right. Never mind. I just don't like these kind of generic good stuff commanders. I found myself like constantly leaning on those whenever we have themes and I just don't know what I need to do for 5 colors. So I hope they kind of use this, make cards like this very scarce. I'm not a huge fan of these kind of cards personally, so I don't think they should exist either. Because it doesn't really spawn an archetype, right?
Yeah,
like in Commanders, it doesn't do any one thing. It's not like, this is the perfect reanimator commander. I mean, it could be, but that's the wild thing, right? Like there's it doesn't. I'm just not a fan of things that don't power up specific niches, which is what I always felt like Commanders should be.
So I'm a little bit divided because I do agree that this is like 90% of the time, 90% of the time you come across a Kenrith deck, it's just a good stuff deck. But I feel like when I'm reading the card, like, okay, 2 mana, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. You can go like 5-color +1/+1 counters matters. 3 mana, target player gains 5 life. You could do 5-color life gain deck. You know, you could, in theory, build around it. And like by itself, I feel like it's not like super oppressively strong too. Like Trouble in Pairs, I feel like if you're in white and you don't run Trouble in Pairs, you're making your deck worse. Whereas Kenrith, I don't know. Would you run Kenrith over like another 5-color thing that cares more about your theme? Probably not. So I think that's a good spot to be in. But at the same time, like, yeah, it's very boring to me, and I don't like that we have like just a generic. It doesn't speak to me. But I don't know. At the same time, I kind of feel like you could. It's not like oppressively strong, which I like. And I don't know, maybe people who just want a deck with their good stuff pile needs just like a random commander. And
Yeah,
I
but
feel
then
like,
you have a Tagatog. You should just be playing a
yeah,
Tagatog in those
but then a
scenarios.
Tagatog doesn't
Although,
do anything.
but it looks cool.
Yeah, it does.
I
Maybe
would
I'm
say, Tomer,
underrating Kenrith.
I agree with you that it's not like overly busted. I think it is good, but it's not like overly busted. It can be like an infinite mana win, which is one of the things that its abilities do. But outside, a lot of things win with infinite mana. I will say one of your arguments that was kind of interesting is if you look at it as like 5-color good stuff Morophon, almost like how Morophon
Yeah.
gives every 5-color tribe a commander that if you don't have something better, you can play that. Maybe Kenrith is kind of like that, where you're like, there isn't a 5-color +1/+1 counter commander, so I guess I can play Kenrith, and it like at least kind of works with my theme. Or 5-color life gain commander, at least this like kind of works with my theme. So I can see that, although personally, in general, I'd rather have commanders push me in more of a direction. And especially with 5-color commanders, just when you have access to all the colors, that's like inherently a powerful ability in Magic to have access to every color, because you get around like color identity stuff. So especially with 5-color commanders, I'd rather see them like push me in a direction rather than just be good with any deck.
Yeah, that's fair. I wish he did something with the monarchy. I think that would be cute.
That would be,
if I could
that would be
redesign
sweet.
it.
And it would fit the theme and fit the flavor. But anyway, let's keep moving on. Tomer, you have a very long list of cards you think shouldn't exist. What do you got for us next?
Okay, I have one because Krim is here, and I know we butt heads on this, so I want to butt heads on this again. It's a little card called Fierce Guardianship. Oh yeah, this staple. It is for those who don't know, I never got countered by it. I bless your soul. You naive child, I love you. Fierce Guardianship, 3 mana, blue instant, but 3 mana. If you control commander, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost. Counter target non-creature spell. So when I'm looking for counter magic, countering non-creature spells is probably the most important thing. Like if I have a board, I don't want you to wrath the board, or if like if you're doing like a removal spell to stop me from winning, I want a way to interact with that very quickly. Thank you. So the effect is very powerful. The cost is 0 mana, and on one hand, I don't like 0 mana counter spells. I really don't, because I feel like half the fun of counter magic is being able to play around it. Like if I see you have 2 blue up, and I know that you run lots of counter magic, it's cool to be like waiting until you tap out so I can actually cast the spell that I want, or sequencing my spell to bait the counter spell before I go for it. I feel like it's a cool minigame that's just kind of lost when you don't have to pay any mana for it. But at the same time, I have no problem with I have much less of a problem with like Force of Will or other cards that require you to pitch a card in order to cast it for free. Because then the cost is having to spend 2 cards instead of just the 1. This one, the cost is just having your commander out. And in a format called Commander, where you have access to your commander at all times, and that even if it dies, you can just replay it, I feel like that's not a strong enough cost. So I don't like this. I don't like this effect. I think the effect is too strong, and I feel like the cost of casting it for free is too low. You should be down 2 cards to cast your spells for free, or the effect needs to be more narrow, both of which are not the case in Fierce Guardianship. I don't like.
I mean, look, I don't really think I need to explain how much I love this this card, but I will once again. It's funny because I think even like didn't they go on record to say that the cycle was a bit egregious? I can't remember somewhere.
So.
Well,
they did, and they also said their philosophy at the time was print the scary cards. This came out around the same. This is the same team that brought us such wonders as Dockside Extortionists. Because they were like, well, the scary cards are exciting at the very least. So just print the scary stuff because they're interesting. And most of the time, scary cards are not actually that bad. And I think they're correct on that. But also sometimes they are. And maybe you should play test it more. I don't know. Anyway, whatever.
I personally don't understand. I thought this was a sweet cycle. I really like the cycle only because there was a huge issue. And I think if you remember from a while back, my point still stands. I like being able to know I can play my commander, right? I can play my commander, back it up, especially if I'm playing something big like, I don't know, uh, some giant costing commander, right? I want to know that I can hold this up. And you might think, oh, wait, Fierce Guardianship is much worse in a deck where the commander costs more. But no, it also secures it that it stays around from a board wipe. So I kind of just like that and the whole cycle itself because of that. It's more incentive to actually play your commander because at the time, I remember me, Seth, well, I think Seth still doesn't really cast his
Seth doesn't know
commander.
what a commander is.
But like, I guess this always just costs Seth mana.
It's a negate. It's an expensive negate.
yeah, for some odd reason for Seth. I just didn't like playing my commander at that time because it felt like it was weird. You had to play your commander at a point that was like way later in the game after all resources like removal and all that have been exhausted. So that's why I liked Fierce Guardianship, because then this whole cycle kind of was like, okay, I get one free. Like I feel like I can play my 4 mana, my 7 mana commander, tap out and protect itself. So this also doesn't really remove the ability to also play around it, right? Because that option's still here. Just like if there are 3 other people, you got to have your resources, right? And you can only tap so much. And in blue, it is something that is needed, right? Usually people respect the open blue mana, but they won't, if you're tapped out, right? So once you're tapped out, I just like that there's some way to fight multiple people at a table. And I think this card helps do that. And it's not like they can't combine together to be like, oh, I'll path your commander. Okay, cool. I'll now board wipe. Someone else will board wipe.
So I just feel like the effect is a little bit too, like, I'm okay with free spells, but like I feel like they could have toned down, made this effect a little bit more narrow. Like nobody's complaining about obscuring haze, like when we talk about the cycle, we have like even the removal spell, the deadly rollick, like that one's fine in my opinion. I just feel like this should have been like misdirection or something.
They
already have misdirection actually, but you know what I mean.
It's blue though. It's blue. What is blue gonna do? And they already toned it down.
Phase out.
What do you care about?
Creature, just phase out a creature so then you can still save your commander or something like that. Like
that's
slip out the back.
If anything, that's more white, right? I'd expect that from white anyways.
Slip out the back. March of Swirling Mist. Come on.
Yes, March of Swirling Mist is good, but I am expecting blue to be some kind of counterspell, and they narrowed it down because what are you trying to stop when you do this? A non-creature spell. If this were just counter anything, okay, that's a different story. I think that would be absurdly busted.
But I mean, this is also like, it's not just protecting your commander, right? This is also like disrupting your opponent's combo or disrupting like their spells. So I could see, maybe being better if it was somehow narrowed. I don't know how you'd word it exactly to where you could use it to defend your commander, but maybe not disrupt your opponent somehow. I don't know what that wording would be like. My bigger question is, I don't like this whole cycle. Like, honestly, I'm kind of in the camp where I think Magic would be better if the words like commander and command zone just didn't appear on Magic cards, period. Like, that's kind of where I come from. Like, I just don't really like that text in Magic cards. But I'm curious, since we live in a world that doesn't really believe in bannings, right? Like, that's one of the risks with commander, with the print the scary stuff theory. It works relatively well in like modern because you print Nadu and then you ban Nadu. We don't really believe in bannings in Commander. At least that's my impression of where we're at with the Commander RC. Instead, the idea is like, the format will deal with itself, deal with it in your play group. Is this a card that you can run in your decks in casual? This is one of the cards, because I have a copy because I brought these precons, and this is one that I had it in one of my blue decks, and then I took it out because I felt weird, like I had to tell people I'm running free counter spells in my deck when we were like talking about our decks. So I took it back out. Like, is this an acceptable, do you guys find this as an acceptable casual level card, or is this like a CDH card for you?
I to be honest with you, I don't care if your deck's 100 counter spells. I don't care which version.
Of course you don't, Chris.
So like for me, it's like, you don't have to tell me anything. Like all I need to know is like how. I just care about fast mana. I think of CDH as the 10 core fast mana.
Yeah.
If you were playing those, you were playing CDH. I don't care what your commander is. I don't care what your theme is. It is CDH.
I'm also on the camp where like I feel like Fierce Guardianship, I see it a lot in casual and I don't really bat an eye. Like I don't like the design. I think having one of it in the format is fine. I'm just worried if they like print more of these, you know? Like once we have like 3 Fierce Guardianships, I think like a lot of the fun, the back and forth of counter magic is like not there anymore, and I don't like that. But like the one, I think it's fine. Also, Mana Drain, like it's incredibly powerful, but like I see it in casual, it's fine. I think I have it in like, I think I have Fierce in like one of my decks. I don't remember which one, but I only have like one copy, so it's in one of the decks, and it's fine. But like, yeah, I'm with Crim, by the way, on the philosophy. Like, I think the biggest thing to avoid is that I personally avoid for casual is fast mana. But like, I take it to the degree where I even take out Soul Ring out of all my decks. Which I know a lot of people don't do, but like I consider fast mana too. So I just take it out because, you know, like I don't like being the person to have the turn 1 Soul Ring starts, you know? So I don't tell anybody that. Like, I don't feel like, hey, you guys should take out
Except
Soul
for
Ring
the thousands of people listening to this podcast.
No, you can run.
You just told everyone.
You never
like,
talk about Soul Ring,
run what
Gomer.
you like.
That's
Run what you like.
that's the big no sign.
But that's like that's where everybody draws a line, you know. Like Crim doesn't like extra turns.
Hey,
Phil doesn't
man's
like
gotta have a
Cyclonic
code.
Rift or whatever. I run Cyclonic Rift. You know, like everybody's got their own code, you know. And my code is no fast mana casual for me, my own decks.
well, let's move on. Crim, what's another card that you think shouldn't exist in Commander?
Okay, I love Dimir. I really love Dimir. I have had almost every Dimir commander under the sun as a deck. And I think we all know where this one I'm going.
Yeah.
I love ninjas. I love the tempo playstyle that Richard says doesn't exist in Commander. But Yuriko the Tiger Shadow. I love this card. I think it's a great 99 card. I think it is a totally acceptable 99 card. But I think its biggest offense is that Commander Ninjutsu. I feel like this is another beating of a dead horse kind of situation. Even the entire design team said this was a mistake.
Even
right?
the person who made this card said like this is a mistake. But still, it exists and we have to deal with it.
Tell me this though. I think I do think this. I wish this didn't exist, and I wish ninjas started with Satoru Umezawa and then Goro forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because every time I have friends that get into Magic, they're like, "Yo, this ninjutsu mechanic seems cool." And I'm like,
It is
before
cool.
you go there,
It is cool.
don't build Yuriko, and because it is a cool mechanic.
Yeah,
but
I love
everybody
ninjutsu.
starts at Yuriko.
Yep.
Right. And I won't lie to you, like she's a cool card. I had fun, yada, yada, yada. But like, I also realize this is it's so miserable against the pod. This is actually just CDH, right? I think this is a commander that is popular in CDH and I've never seen it go fairly. So if you want to play Yuriko or something along these lines and you like this kind of play style, it removes the ninjutsu part, but I would play Marvo. I would do something else, right? I feel like Yuriko's Commander Ninjutsu makes it just like a miserable play experience because you can't remove her because she's just going to go to the command zone. You can't let a bunch of 1/1 sit around or else you're going to get hit with like some giant temporal trespass. Like she's such an offensive card, I think, in my opinion, in so many ways, just play pattern and also power level.
There was a new Umezawa from Thunder Junction that I liked.
Yeah.
But now I'm forgetting
the 2-drop, the Infiltrator.
Satoru the Infiltrator. Also 2-drop, also draws cards when you're ninjutsuing. A little bit more open-ended, I guess. But like you could build a ninja deck. You could literally just take your Yuriko pile and just like swap Yuriko for Satoru. Maybe take out like the Dracos or whatever. That are specific to Yuriko, but you don't have to make that many swaps. And you could run Yuriko in the 99, and I think the deck is like super awesome. But yeah, it is a little bit annoying. It's kind of like the Edgar Markov of vampires, where it's like there's so many cool options, and vampires are super fun. But like, of course, if you're building a vampire deck, why wouldn't you run Edgar Markov? Everybody starts at Edgar Markov, even though there's like other cool options to explore.
So with this card, the big issue is really the Commander Ninjutsu, right? And the problem with that is, if you don't know how this works, it gets around the command tag. So essentially, when Yuriko's in the command zone, you can always ninjutsu it into play for 2 mana, no matter how many times you've done it. I've always wondered why they didn't just change the rules on Commander Ninjutsu to be like the command tag applies. Like, would that fix Yuriko? Would Yuriko be a fun a fun card then, or would it still be like just the play pattern's too miserable that even if you had to pay the tax on it, it would still be miserable, you think?
I think that the command, like the command tax adding to it would definitely help. I think I wouldn't care as much. It would still be a powerful commander, but that's okay. You can have powerful cards.
Yeah.
I just don't like the constant just up 2 mana, one way or the other, she's on the board.
Yeah.
So I think they need to add the tax. And are there other commander ninjutsu cards?
No.
This
If
is
not,
the only one.
it's the
So
only
it
one.
seems like you
Then, yeah,
could make a rule just for this card that you got to pay the command tax on Commander Ninjutsu, and then
Yeah.
I guess the only problem with errataing it is then people that do play it like in like CDH, they'll
that's true.
like be it'll change the whole game plan of that deck.
Yeah,
So,
it'll make some people who are playing it at a high level and want it to be super high level, it'll make them sad. I feel like it would also, I think it would actually make more people happy though, because I know of people like on my level who like they built a Yuriko deck, they blinged it out, but then they never get to play her.
because
She
it's
just
too
sit
strong.
on the shelf and like it's their baby. They've blinked her out. They've gotten all the foil copies of all the ninjas, but it's too strong. And it's just like a ninja pile. It's not CDH. I feel like there's more people out there who probably would actually benefit from that change because they'd be able to finally play the deck that is their baby than there are CDH people who would be like, oh, my Yuriko deck is no longer as good. Just anecdotally, but yeah.
Well, and I don't think like if you look at just like CDH data, I don't think Yuriko's like the best deck in the format or anything,
not.
right? If you just look at like metagame, it is like a deck, but it's not like this is the deck that's just gonna totally shake up the entire format. So I could get behind that change. If there's a way, I'm not a big fan of erratas in general, but I think I could get behind changing Yuriko so people could actually play with it. But let's keep moving on. I got one. I gotta shout out this card because this is a card I play all the time, and the more I play with it, the more I become convinced that the card just should not exist. And it's a card we've talked about a bunch, and that card is Open the Way. So if you don't know Open the Way, this is probably one of the cards I cast the most on Commander Clash last season. It's just 2 mana and X. And it says X can't be greater than the number of players in the game. So you can cast it for 3 mana up to 6 mana. And it says reveal cards from the top of your library into your reveal X land cards. Put those lands into play, tap the rest on the bottom in any order. So essentially for 3 mana, you get 1 land. All the way up to 6 mana, you can get 4 lands into play. And I have become convinced that ramp that puts non-basics into play is not a healthy thing for the game. And I think that this card is the biggest like example of that, where I think this card is actually just too good. And it's funny because if you look at EDH Rec, people haven't realized this yet because it's in like 2% of decks or something. And I think every time I see that number, I think, well, what is going on? Like, how do people not see how busted this card is? But I was looking on Scryfall, and you can sort cards by their release date. And if you look at cards that put non-basic lands into play, we've gotten way more of them in the last year or two than we have in the previous ages of Magic. Not that they didn't exist before, but now we're getting them on a regular basis. We got Open the Way, and then Clifftop Lookout, and then Sowing Microspawn, and then Freeze Strider Lookout. So Omen Path Journey. So there's a pretty big list. Archdruid's Charm. So I think that these effects should actually be very rare and scarce. I think, not that you can never have non-basic lands be tutored up, but I think that the proliferation of ramping into non-basic lands is actually very harmful to Commander. And I know the counter argument that Tomer is probably going to say is just play Price of Progress and you'll wreck everyone. But I don't think most people build their decks that way. And I almost feel like I'm cheating. Like the same way that when you play the turn 1 Soul Ring, you kind of feel bad because you like have the fast mana and you're so far ahead. When I resolve Open the Way for 3 or 4, I feel the same. I feel like unless they can somehow kill me this turn cycle, I am very favored to win this game. So I think the card itself shouldn't exist. And I also think that non-basic land ramp should not be as common as it is today. I think we got to chill a little bit with the non-basic land ramp, but I'm curious what you guys think about this one.
I mean, look, I won't lie to you. I've been playing it in my green decks, right? I do have 2 green decks. It's been there, and I think that I've played against it, and having played against you for a whole season with it, yeah, this card's the truth. But then again, I guess I'm so numb to green doing busted land ramp things now. It's just like I don't even like feel like, oh, it's
just normal.
Blue get a new counter spell. That's cool.
Funny.
Okay, so I could see why this would brush by a lot of people. and why is this on this list? And it's because it's just something that you see all the time, but kind of like, a little bit more beefed up. So I think that I cannot stress this enough. The talk about it on the podcast or when we play Commander Clash, I think that it's the truth. That talk is real. It's not scripted. This isn't WWE. No. This is like actually the truth. The card is nuts.
I have so much to say. So I agree that this card is good, but I think this card. Okay, so two things. First of all, I agree that being able to ramp out a lot of non-basic lands, in theory, can be a big issue. In practice, I think the reason why you don't see it that much is because your average Commander player is not running what I would call the content creator mana base, where it's like every single deck we play is going to be all the fetches, all the duels, all the surveil lands, all the Field of Dead with like 3 ways of copying it and getting it back from the graveyard, like all of this stuff. That's like $300 per deck. People are not spending that mana. I remember I went to a Command Fest Frankfurt like a couple days ago, and like also in Amsterdam, people were just coming to me unprompted and they're like, Tomer, thank you for talking sense to these people. We don't put like these many. We run basics. Like it's normal. And it's 100%. It's a content creator mana base, and I think like in a content creator mana base, this card is way stronger than if you're just like hitting a bunch of basics. Because like for 5 mana, you know what I could do with basics? I can cast Traverse to Outlands. If I have a 6/6 on the battlefield, I just ramped out 6 basics. If I'm in Elf Ball and I tap like 5 elves for mana and I cast Harvest Season, there's 5 basics on the battlefield for 3 mana. Like green just does this all the time. And if you want non-basics too, Exploration, Burgeoning, some of the most powerful turn 1 plays. They can even Burgeoning can make Soul Ring Blush, when you have a bunch of bounce lands in your hand and you're just like boom boom boom, I have 6 mana on turn 1 or whatever. Nonsense like that. That's just green. This is green ramp. It's silly. But yeah, I don't think Open the Way is like bannable or really a mistake. Just green is a mistake. The green is not a mistake.
Green might be a mistake. You might.
The ramp is
right
really
there.
good.
Okay, let me ask you this though, Tomer. So does the acceptance of proxying change this? So if the argument is, this card isn't actually a problem because we play content creator mana bases that are super expensive in the current era where proxying has become more and more accepted. Is there any concern that that's not going to keep power levels in check? Because if people want to play the content creator mana base, they can just proxy it up and do it that way.
Good. I'm just gonna keep playing Price of Progress and having a great time. I was like, my response would be print more Price of Progresses. Make it better. Make it better. You make a version, same mana cost, same effect, can't be countered. Damage
can't be prevented. Yes, damage can't be prevented.
They did. It's on the cat.
That is. Sunspine Links is kind of.
It doesn't do double damage. Garbage.
No, it's only
garbage.
No. Play damage doublers.
Yeah. No, the Price of Progress stonks keep going up. I'm just putting it on my decks. I'm like, free wins. Yes, right. More non-basics.
Cool.
Yes.
I think Tomer has a fair point. Tomer might have a fair point here that maybe it's our like how I build decks and how the Commander Clash like content creator meta is that makes it so busted. I think in the meta that we play, it is like a card that I think shouldn't be printed. But you might be right that in the broader world, maybe you probably are right that most people are not building their decks that way. They're playing 32 lands and half of them are basics. And like in that world, Open the Way is very, very different than the like 40 land MDFC all non-basic meta. So
I mean, that meta is just like, they're not gonna open the way for more than one.
You'd prefer Cultivate because first of all, you're not gonna get to 5 mana to cast your Open the Way, and secondly, Cultivate gets a land so you can get your land drop. Like it's way better.
You need it. All right, last round. Let's each get one more pick for a card that we think shouldn't exist. Tomer, you're first up for round 3. What do you got?
God. I think I have to, right?
You
I
gotta.
have to.
You gotta do it.
Rhystic Study. For those who don't know, Rhystic Study. Oh God, I feel like I've said this card a lot. I'm looking it up. Let me see what the text says. 3 mana, blue enchantment. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless I pay or pays 1. Okay, so this card just basically reads. Let's be real here. This card just reads like every single turn you're gonna draw 3 cards. You know, maybe more. Who knows? In an irresponsible group. In a responsible group, it's gonna read. This is sphere of resistance that only affects all your opponents. Very fun. Much wow. And either way, this card is absolutely nonsense. And the thing that's even worse, so the way I handle this card, and I try to handle it responsibly, card gets cast by somebody else, because I do not cast this garbage card. This abomination. Somebody casts this card, and I tell the table, I will always pay the 1 if everyone else pays the 1. And then if it works, great. You know, we're all sphere of resistance. We're all being stacked, but we get through it and we punish the Rhystic Study player. All is right with the world. The other way that it's played, though, is people are like, actually, we should actually think. Well, there's a Seth way, which is the chaos way, right? He's like, I'm not going to think about it. I'm always going to let you draw a card. Who cares? Whatever. And then the Rhystic Study player wins. Then there's the middle ground. There's a middle ground. You know, there's like those graphs. You know, where there's like the people who are like the crazy brain, and the other people who are like the super enlightened. Then there's the people in the middle who are like the people who are like really freaking out and frustrated. They're the ones like, I have to think about every single time when I cast a spell whether or not I will pay the 1. You know what that does to the game? It slows it to a crawl, because every single card you think about, you're like, oh well, I have to look at. You want to cast a card draw spell? Oh well, I have 4 other lands afterwards. Well, if I pay the 1 here, and I draw some cards, will I have enough mana to pay the 1 for the next one? I'm not quite sure. And then everything just slows down. The game just crashes in terms of tempo, and we are just playing the Rhystic Study game. And it is awful. It's even worse than just not ever paying, you know, like just, it's so bad. I hate this card. I hate this card with the passion of a burning suns. If I had a time machine, I would use a time machine to just delete this from the master list so it was never printed. That would be my only use of the time machine, and I can't buy it back. I hate this card. I hate it so much. So much.
I know. The game when there was a Ugin and a Rhystic Study, you killed the Rhystic Study and we died to Ugin, and you were like, I would do that every time. That's when I knew that you really hated Rhystic Study. Let me ask you, Tomer, how would you make Rhystic Study okay? Like, how could you what if you want an effect like this on an enchantment in blue? Like, is there a way to make it okay? I noticed on your list you had Trouble in Pairs, which is kind of Rhystic Study-ish. Also the One Ring, which we're not going to get to, but like, is there a fair way to make these kind of card draw effects, or should we just not have that style of card draw, period, in your opinion?
The do you pay the X is like the absolute worst thing in Magic the Gathering. The fact that it triggers off every single spell. I would just rather, if you said, I want an enchantment in blue that is absolutely busted and draws me all the cards, I would just prefer if it said Rhystic Study. Every single turn, draw 3 cards. That's it. That's it. No, nothing else. That's it. Just at the beginning of everybody's end step, draw 3 cards. Done. Yeah. No, keep it honest, but don't waste my time. Don't waste my time with this. Either it's a sphere of resistance, or should I pay the 1 for this one or not? Or do you pay the 1? None of it. Just be honest. Just say it's a garbage, busted card. Say draw 3 every single turn and be done with it.
Do you play Rhystic Study, Krim? What do you think about this?
I think, having been the person on the other end of that where Tomer chose to blow up like Ugin or Rhystic Study, I can't remember if I was the one casting the Rhystic Study.
You probably were.
I think I was, because I was so blown away that Tomer would take out my Rhystic Study over losing. But that should be enough to tell you that I... Yeah, okay, all right. I don't think the card's like anywhere nearly as offensive as Tomer. It like makes it out to be, but I do think I could see why. I could see why people would be upset about it. I personally like playing it. I don't mind playing against it either. It's like a good check, right? I've started to get my local pods to like play responsibly. Oh, I'll just add one to all my spells. And people are like, these games don't happen in real life. Well, I guess it's just my small sample size.
It does happen.
Because
I've gotten a lot of people to agree with me on just paying the one always. A lot of times.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people where we're just like,
They don't
I'll
have
do it
the time
until it's
there.
inconvenient for me.
it,
then
oh,
it's all
God,
goes
that
to-
happens.
It all goes to crap afterwards.
And you know what's usually followed by, oh, wait, I don't understand. I guess they had it all. I don't know how they drew
Yeah.
every card they
How
needed.
did they keep having all these counter spells? How did they get the Fierce Guardianship and the Force of Will? Well, gee, I wonder.
They have all the
they have like
answers.
40 cards in their hand. It's like, oh my god, they keep answering everything.
They're so lucky.
How did they find their combo without tutoring for it?
The one thing I'll say about Rhystic Study, in defense of this card existing and Wizards, if you look at the rest of the cards on our list, they are all cards printed in the last 5 or 10 years, like in the Commander era. Rhystic Study is for like 2001 or something. Like,
Yeah.
when they made this card, I think it was a perfectly fine card for them to make, because they didn't even know that Commander would be a thing at that point, and it was like unplayed in Standard and other formats. So I think when they made this card, I think it was perfectly fine. But in the context of what Magic has become and how popular Commander has become, if they could go back in time, I don't think they would make Rhystic Study now. Like, if they knew Commander would be the biggest format in Magic, I don't think they would have printed it back in Prophecy.
They just
or
made
whatever.
trouble in pairs, Seth. I'm not quite sure.
Maybe they would. Maybe
my
they
trust
would.
has been waning.
And the One Ring.
And the One Ring.
All right, let's go move on to Krim. Krim, give us one more card that shouldn't exist.
Okay. So is it a card or is it more of just a rule change that I missed? Because I'm gonna just read it because I imagine none of y'all will even like. Do y'all know the card Spell Crumple?
My
Spell
back
Crumple
hurts,
is
Grim.
just-
Of course I know what's
Yeah, like gather around, younglings. Let me tell you a story. Spell Crumple is a 3-mana counter spell, right? 1 blue instant, counter target spell. If that spell is countered this way, put it on the bottom of its owner's library instead of into that player's graveyard. Put Spell Crumple on the bottom of its owner's library. So, wait, that's great. Why does that matter? Well, long time ago, the tuck rule used to be a thing where you could tuck commanders and they would then be lost in their own opponent, their controller's library. So that means your opponents will then have to find a way to tutor it out or do something. And I'm bringing up Spell Crumple because I loved playing Spell Crumple and effects like this, Hinder, also just like, Ablation, things like that, right? I miss the tuck rule. I'm not going to lie to you. As commanders get more busted, absurd, like imagine if you could just tuck Nadu, right? Like if you just tuck Nadu, then you don't have to see him for a while.
trigger, draw a card, put a land.
Draw a card, sure. But at least, like you tried, right? The tuck rule kind of also makes it so that, yeah, I get it. The whole purpose of the format is commander, but commanders are kind of busted. Right? Like they are absolutely kind of busted. The idea of what a commander is a spell that you can always play or something you can always do at any point in the game when you have nothing at the very worst, right? And it is this constant free spell. It was like almost like a companion, or a companion might be based off commander. Who knows? But the point is being able to tuck said commander to be done with it. I don't view it as any different than if someone oubliettes or if somebody does something that along those lines to my commander. Like when my Scarab God got oublietted, I have like one answer to that. So it's going to be a long time until I see my commander again. So is it too egregious to say that we missed the tuck rule? Because I genuinely, maybe this is just what happens when you play so much commander that I'm just like, okay, maybe we could just not see the commander for a few turns or have to worry about it, right? Like the ominous threat that, next turn, Seth's got mana for Kenrith that we dealt with already twice.
I don't even cast my commander. You gotta worry about me.
True.
I mean,
true.
I will say, on a personal level, I like the strategic elements, I think, of the tuck rule existing. But I think with what commander is and how it's like the new player introduction format, I think it was probably the correct change for the format as a whole. If anything, we see more and more Wizards making commanders less touchable with their card design. We see like
Fierce
mind
Guardianship.
control effects that like say non-commander creature explicitly to make sure you won't be able to like steal your opponent's commander. So I feel like if anything, Wizards is going further and further towards not letting you interact permanently with commanders. So I think commander would be better for us probably if the tuck rule existed, because it adds that strategic element. Although I do dislike that it encourages you to play more tutors, and if your commander doesn't get tucked, then you're probably just going to tutor up whatever your best card is, and it leads to like more of that gameplay, and I don't really like tutors in Commander. But I think that's where I land. Like, for old timers like us that have been playing the format forever, it's probably more fun with the tuck rule. But for the format as a whole, I think it was probably like for the greater good in this case for everyone. But what do you think, Tomer?
I kind of like I like the tuck rule because I do agree with Krim that there has to be more answers to commanders as commanders get more and more powerful. It kind of feels like a game of, can I stop the opponents from snowballing with their commander long enough for me to snowball with my commander? That's what it feels like the format is quickly becoming. So having more answers to opponents' commanders is always nice. The only problem with tuck rule didn't really have a problem to me. It was just more like, I feel like the current design is clean, where you could, if you're explaining to a new player, you can be like, if your commander leaves the battlefield and goes to any other zone, you can instead put it straight, you can put it right afterwards from that zone, right into the command zone right afterwards, like immediately. So it doesn't have to stay in whatever zone it's going to go to, which I think is kind of clean. And I don't like, you don't have to throw that exception of like, but if it goes into the library, it stays there, you know? So I like the fact that it's just like a nice absolute, like, if it goes anywhere from the battlefield, you can put it back into the command zone. Like, that's nice and clean and simple. And I like that. However, I would like more answers that are geared to taking out commanders specifically. So, like, I like oubliettes. I like Darksteel Mutation. You know, those auras that can go onto the Elks, Oko. I like those Oko effects. I think we need to see more of those. Maybe like a Soul Shatter that hits like all planes, all commanders. That'd be kind of fun. There's Leadership Vacuum that does it for one person's commanders and draws you a card. I like that one too. But I want to see more of it. I want to see more answers to commanders.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. More ways to answer it that are not, you know, push you to playing a bunch of tutors because you're gonna be afraid that your commander ends up in your library. Maybe that's a good middle ground for that one. Well, all right, last card. And this one, Teferi's Protection. I gotta bring up Teferi's Protection as a card. And I think this is a card that, for me, it has been proven that it shouldn't exist by the cards that were printed after it. When I printed Teferi's Protection, I think Teferi's Protection maybe needed to exist as a way to like protect your board and protect your life total. If you don't somehow know this, commander ultra stable, 3-mana instant until your next turn, your life total can't change. You gain protection from everything. All your permanents phase out. It goes to exile. So when they printed this, I think there was actually a need for more of this style of protection spell. Wraths were getting better, interaction was getting better, combos a thing. This was a card that could protect you from pretty much anything, and I think we needed more cards like that. But I think since then, we've gotten what I would consider more balanced versions of Teferi's Protection. I think the fact that it protects you, and it protects your board, and it's really difficult to interact with is just too much. But we've seen like Galadriel's Dismissal, we've seen Clever Concealment, we've seen Flare of Fortitude. There's a huge list of like not quite as good as Teferi's Protection cards that I think are about the right power level for this card. So I think for me, this was a case of like Wizards experimenting with a relatively new effect in Commander and just going too far. Like, we've seen this when they first printed equipment. They made Skull Clamp. When they first did vehicles, they made the Smuggler's Copter that ended up getting banned everywhere. So I think sometimes when you experiment with these new effects in a new context, it's easy to go a little bit too far. And I think that Teferi's Protection just went a little bit too far, and it's just so good and efficient at what it does. I think it makes things less interesting. We've had so many games of Commander Clash that like someone does a really cool, interesting thing, and the end result is one player being like, "Oh, Teferi's protection. I'm not going to deal with this." And it's like, to me, that's kind of an anticlimactic way for this really cool, interesting turn to end, with someone like casting a 3-mana spell and just being like, "I'm not going to be involved in the game for a turn." So I would much rather see what they're doing now, which is more Flare of Fortitudes and clever concealments and Guide of Faith, and just stay away from these like do literally everything in one card kind of protection spells like Teferi's protection. I think it just went too far. But what do you guys think about T-Pro? Are you glad it exists?
Am I glad it exists, or have I just gotten used to it? I play it a lot, but I think it's kind of unfortunately a necessary evil. Right?
I don't clever concealment, right? That does
right.
Dawn's
most of it.
Truce. Dawn's Truce is another one.
Dawn's
Truce.
Truce.
You have
Everybody
all
Lives.
These new
Everybody
protection
Lives?
spells.
Yeah, there's so many in white. Jeez.
But the protecting of yourself as well is nice, right? And I think it's nice to know it's nice to know that you have like a super fog, right? Teferi's Pro is like a super fog that like saves all your stuff as well and allows you to just nope. I kind of like something like that in Commander, because in a multiplayer format, it's very easy for someone who's constantly like beat up on by like 2 or more opponents. It's nice to know that I can just be like, you know what? Y'all can't hit me anymore. So how about that? And it gives me a turn to kind of like recoup and figure out where I'm at, right? So I like that. I think something like that should exist. I don't think they should make more of them. I think there should be one. I think there should be exactly one, maybe 2 at most, but like that's it.
I'm kind of with Seth on this one, where it's a little bit much, and it's definitely the part where you just get to not die for an entire turn cycle. Like, okay, you save your board, that's one thing. That's like worth 2 mana in my opinion, because like we have Dawn's Truce and Everybody Lives and stuff. This one gets around exile, so like that's a nice bonus for that already. 3 mana. I feel like there could have been a middle ground, like maybe you only fog this turn and then the next person can attack you. Because like a lot of the time, this Teferi's protection, yeah, it's used to like clutch out not dying, to like a lethal attack or whatever. But like it kind of sucks when you're like there's an arch enemy and like the entire board it wants to deal with you, and you just like for 3 mana you're just like, none of you can deal with me.
exist.
I'm gonna win on my next turn, and there's nothing you could do about it. And everybody else is just like, okay, that's it.
Yeah, what can you do in that scenario? There's not really like, unless you can counter it down the stack, there's not really a way around it.
I think I fought for 1 turn, not everybody's turn. You know, like that's. Although it has led to my favorite win of all time was when I killed people with commander damage through it, which was I think one of my favorite that was my favorite Commander Clash kill of all time, obviously.
That's a good one, because it's so rare that it actually comes together. That's a really good one. I found myself personally just like excluding this card more and more. Rare occasions I still play it if I feel like I have to, but I found myself having more fun if I got to work for it a little bit more. It probably makes my win rate worse overall, but I think I enjoy it more when I'm on the like clever concealment level or like Everybody Lives level compared to the Teferi's protection level. So maybe it's just me that I've like sort of excluded it a little bit, because I don't know, I don't find it fulfilling when I win with Teferi's Pro. Those games that you're talking about where it's like, oh, I just phase out, untap, and win. I don't come away from that feeling like, oh, I like did a really cool win in this game of Magic. I come away from it feeling kind of dirty, like, oh, I cast a 3-mana spell and it let me win the game. So I find it a little bit more enjoyable when I got to work for it a little bit. But anyway, that is our list of commander cards that we think shouldn't exist, and a commander rules change that we don't think should exist. But we want to know what you think. What commander cards do you think shouldn't exist? What do you think about our list? Are there any cards you disagree with? Let us know in the comments, and we will be back next week to talk even more commander. So until then, have an amazing week, everyone. And this is the crew signing out.